How do you move forward after seeing God move? Is your life rearranged, or do you just remain the way you used to be? Do you make permanent changes in your life, or do you revert back to the old self? It's interesting to see how quickly Nebuchadnezzar changes back to his old ways. He had just witnessed the power of God as Daniel both explained and interpreted his dreams. But the next thing we read about in our story is the king's creation of a 90-foot-high gold statue. This statue would become the focus of worship. Well, after the completion of this masterpiece, it's time for some royal protocol. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace." Picture the scene. Hundreds of governmental officials out in the desert for some kind of a pep rally. So they may have been uncomfortable, but no one dared say a word. And then the band plays and everyone bows down. But while bowing, a guy notices the three guys standing next to him. And that's just it. They're still standing. Bowing before anyone or anything other than the one true God wouldn't have even crossed the mind of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. True, they were in a foreign land and had been influenced by a foreign culture, but this was a fundamental issue they had learned from their childhood. They grew up practicing and knowing God's laws and commands. They knew the 10 Commandments. There was no way they would be caught bowing to some statue. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." The king is informed of their disobedience and goes into a fit of rage. He gives them a second chance and reminds them of their fiery alternative. Well, they choose indeed to continue their disobedience because they will not bow down to the king's statue. During this time, they also make a strong statement of faith in their God. They knew that God was able to save them, but their loyalty to God was not based upon His actions. Whether or not God would save them had nothing to do with the fact that they would not bow down to the king. That's incredible. Do you have faith like that? Do you believe that God can do anything? Do you believe that He can save you from the midst of a difficulty? Are you willing to trust Him even if He chooses not to do that? It reminds me of martyrs who throughout the ages believed in the power of God, yet were willing to die for their faith. Would you be willing to die for your faith? Or perhaps this is an even better question. Are you willing to live for your faith? I don't know which became hotter, the king's anger or the temperature of the furnace. In fact, the furnace became so hot that the guys carrying Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to their deaths, they themselves were killed. And then we read about the powerful hand of God. But before we celebrate God's arrival, let's remember that our friends are in the furnace. They believed in God and were unwilling to compromise. God didn't deliver them from the furnace. He delivered them in the furnace. Where are you feeling the heat right now? What situations might cause you to lose your cool? How will you respond? In looking in the lives of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we've come to see that God's people respond faithfully regardless of the circumstance. You can respond this way as well. Remember that your story is being lived out in the context of a bigger story, the story, and the author of the story has everything under control.